there, spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Whoa.
I'm Robin Grace, and this is Adam Diaz.
Hello.
Today, we have a, I want to say, interesting episode. Yours is a bit sad. Mine is a bit mysterious / true crime-ish. So
I hope for one day for you to be like, we have a shitty episode for you today. Strap in, folks. We're not doing what we're mailing it in today. No, the shitty episodes
are like the Q&A where we don't know the answers. Like, it takes us forever to figure out, like, what my favorite fucking movie is. And like, I swear every single year it's something different.
Well, for those Q&A episodes, I edit out all the dead air. We're trying to figure stuff out, so it still sounds good.
Yeah, because I feel like the only movie that stays consistent, really, for me, is Constantine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's constant. Yeah.
Wow. Clearly, we know each other pretty well.
So
yeah, this episode should be, I think it'll be pretty good. Robin did say mine was kind of depressing, and yeah, that's going to be true. I'm covering Exorcisms Gone Wrong, and I know what you're thinking. What could go wrong with an exorcism? Well, a lot. So, what are you covering this episode, Robin?
I'm going to be covering the disappearance of a quote-unquote Baroness from the Galapagos Islands. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
Disappearances are always fancy. I have Amelia Earhart on our topic doc, and I'm always like, is today Amelia Earhart Day?
Are you one of those people who are like, Amelia Earhart is still or still lived after she disappeared? Well, she just went off the grid.
No, because I don't know much aside from the fact that she disappeared. Like,
okay.
No, she was a female aviator and she disappeared. That's everything I know about it. So I'm like, this will be a fun one to dig into, so I know more.
That would be cool to look into, because there are tales of her having survived and lived a life somewhere else, and they found evidence of her or something.
See, I don't know any of this. This sounds fascinating.
Yeah, you should cover it. It would be fun.
So one day we will get to Amelia Earhart. That is not going to be today, however. I will say, episode 279 was starting to feel pretty fucking cursed for me. It just was like the episode we couldn't get out.
Yeah, Adam's going to make a little video and tell you guys all about it.
I'm going to tell you guys about it now. I'll give you guys a little bit of extra juice on the Patreon video I post. But yeah, so let's go over the whole thing. So this episode was supposed to come out last week. Before we recorded it, though, before we even picked our topics and started researching, I think Monday last week, Robin got a notification from Red Bull Racing like, hey, do you want to come to Austin, Texas for an event Wednesday night? And she was like, fuck yeah, we do. So we said, can we do this? Figured out if we had any like airplane miles, which I had a bunch. So I'm just like, I can do the tickets. Let's find a cheap Airbnb. Let's go down there and see what they have to offer. We got to go to practice and qualifying on Friday. So yeah, we had this impromptu little mini vacation to Austin to just absorb all the F1 that the city could throw at us. It was fucking awesome.
It was really cool. Super, like, I felt so spoiled by Red Bull. Like, they were absolutely amazing.
Multiple hats that were really high quality. A polo that's super fancy. Even the buttons say Red Bull on them.
Yeah, we were definitely spoiled.
We were 10 feet from Max Verstappen, 3-time world F1 champion, including this year.
Oh no, dude, I was way closer than that. I wish I had like a pen, a Sharpie.
I told you to, like, why don't you just ask someone else for their Sharpie?
And you know what? Everybody, all my friends at work were like, why didn't you just ask to borrow them?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh man, I'm weak.
Everyone was very, very nice, and they show you the car that they're going to be racing with. I mean, it's very similar, but the livery, the paint job, is different from race to race, and they brought it in on a fucking helicopter and landed it in a like the grass patch right by where they had this event happening, which was the headquarters for the Oracle company. So it was crazy. It was just, that was all Wednesday too. Then Thursday we went downtown into Austin, got to see the town. We ate at a barbecue food truck.
Checked out Williams Racing.
Checked out Williams Racing event, which was downtown, which was also pretty cool. Everyone there was very nice. Robin bought herself a hoodie. She bought some stuff for some family members, which was nice. And I don't know, it was a really good time. And then Friday we went to COTA, the Circuit of the America F1 racetrack.
Circuit of the Americas.
Circuit of the Americas. What a stupid asshole I am for getting that wrong, right? And yeah, it was shockingly, what's a good way for it?
Painful?
Amateurish in how you have to get to the track. I'm going to tell you, if you're going to go see F1, I highly recommend it. It's super fun.
This has become an F1 podcast?
I mean, you made it this way when we started recommending Drive to Survive. But if we're going to talk about why we missed an episode, the people should know. So on Friday when the episode was supposed to release, we were taking an Uber to this racetrack. So what really happens, though, is you don't take an Uber to the racetrack. You take an Uber to a local fucking high school where you're picked up by a bus that takes you about 1.5 miles further into like what's essentially an empty parking lot in a field. And then you walk up a dirt road about 1.5 miles to get to the racetrack. And they have a shuttle that comes every now and then to pick you up and take you to the racetrack. Otherwise, you're going to hoof it the whole way. And I know F1's getting really big again, especially in the States. And I'm just like, if they're going to do this, they need to logistically figure out how to not have people walk 1.5 miles up a fucking dirt road to get to the venue. It was bafflingly dumb.
Yeah, my feet hurt real bad.
And then leaving the place once we were done watching qualifying, we had to catch our flight that same night. We're like, we got to get back home. So we had to like walk back down that same dirt road. And then they just have this massive line of like 3,000 or 4,000 people waiting to get on those buses that they hope don't get caught in traffic. And we got lucky. This happens to us a lot. The line split, like if you're loading like 70 people onto a bus, or like if you're at a theme park and they're doing the clicky thing, like how many people can get on the ride, like it always splits at Robin and I, where it's like either directly in front of us or directly behind us. And the split was going to happen at her, between her and me. And they asked her, are these people with you? Because there was 2 or 3 people behind me and they thought I was with them. And she's like, he's with me. So they let me go. We got on like this bus. And I was like, that might be the difference of us making our flight. And due to some circumstances, we actually wound up having a little bit of extra time. But it was a close call, man. So it was really fun. But we wound up not getting an episode. We're like, hey, let's get the episode out early the next week so that everyone's like, oh, cool, they put one out early. I posted on Spooky Friends group on Facebook. I was like, guys, early episode this week to make up for the fact that we missed last week. People are like, cool.
But then I have work, and so it's impossible.
Oh, no, this isn't Robin's fault.
Oh, okay.
Last night, we're like, okay, let's record Wednesday night. Let's get the episode out a day early, and we'll have like, this extra day where we can play around on the weekend to see if we want to do something for Halloween, maybe release a reading like we do every now and then. And I write this brilliant 6-page script on an exorcism gone wrong. Mind-blowing. I found this book on the Internet Archives, and it was super in-depth on everything that happened. All these amazing details. It's like one of the best scripts I've written in a long time. Feeling super jazzed. I tell Robin, hey, I just finished. Save it, get the microphone set up, and then I'm like, why does this name look familiar? And then I search, and what I usually do when I find a topic is I go through our list of episodes, and I just search the name. This time, I searched the word exorcism, and I went through all the episodes that I've covered in exorcism, and then as soon as I was done writing the script, I was like, maybe I should have searched the word possession. And so I started searching the word possession, and sure enough, I think it's like episode 112. I was like, son of a fucking bitch. 121, I covered it, and it's the possession of Michael Taylor. I had already covered it, and I somehow, because I got this new source material for what happened during the entire event.
This episode would have been
I wrote a 6-page script on something I had already covered before I realized, holy shit, I've already covered this. There was one really gruesome detail about the murder that I was like, why does that sound familiar? It's because he also, amongst the other people he killed his dog.
Aww.
And I was just like, what a horrible thing to do.
Oh, no, that's the Frenchy one.
That's a different one, yeah. But very similar in content. But
okay.
yeah, I was like, it was like midnight last night. I was just standing here in the office like, I'm such a stupid fucking asshole. I'm so upset right now. I was like, I guess we got to record tomorrow, which is now today. So that is why you're getting an episode non-early. But hey, at least this one is on time. So long story short, I fucked up and I apologize. And last week we were out of town to watch some F1 shit. And yeah. So this week I'm going to be covering Exorcisms Gone Wrong. And I think I'm going first, in fact.
Okay.
So this week, like I mentioned, I wanted to cover this exorcism of Michael Taylor, but I've already done that. So if you want to listen to it, go ahead and listen to episode 121. It's a pretty good one if you don't remember it. Essentially, this dude undergoes an exorcism from a group of people at his church. Doesn't work. He goes home and murders his wife and his dog. And he blames them. And then there's a bunch of other stuff that happens during his trial where people blame like this 22-year-old chick who was staying with his family, who was just like trying to teach them about God, and they decide she's a witch and all this other bullshit. And it got really intense during the trial. He wound up being found not guilty through reason of insanity. So it was a crazy case. And again, episode 121, if you want to check that out. After I wrote that script, I was like, well, I'm sticking on the possession bandwagon. I'm going to try and find some other ones. And I kept finding these ones that didn't have a lot of meat on the bones. But they were all similar in the aspect that something went wrong during the exorcism or the aftermath of it. So I decided that I was just going to name my topic Exorcisms Gone Wrong, and I'm going to go over 3 of these things. So my topic is going to be 3 separate exorcisms, and I will tell you, because it's called Exorcisms Gone Wrong, they don't have happy endings. So don't expect one. It's not going to be like, and then they exorcised the demon and everything was fine. So I'll put the caveat at the front of this episode. Obviously, this could all be bullshit. There's no way to actually verify if a person is possessed and not just mentally ill, but the actions taken by the people involved are certainly real. That is not bullshit. And in some cases, the decisions that are made here are questionable at best and murderous at worst, seriously. And you're going to hear about these. So it's very similar to the one I just quickly described, like Michael Taylor. Folks may decide that a person's violent or just scary and bizarre behavior is the result of a demon and some sort of demonic possession, an attempt to exorcise this demon out, but may only wind up making it much, much worse. And I don't say that from a position of this person has something else wrong with them. If you believe in demons, if that's like something you believe in, if your religion is something that you follow that has demonic possession as a part of it, if you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't be trying to exorcise a demon, leave it up to the professionals. In most of these cases, it was just people being like, yeah, we can take care of that. And either way, like whether demonic possession is actually a thing and you tried it and you were not qualified to do it, or they weren't demonically possessed, they're just schizophrenic, like the decisions that are made here are just straight up bad. So there are dire consequences in the cases I'm going to cover. And the first one I'm going to touch takes place in London, England, and it took place on Christmas Day 2010. So this one is actually very recent. A young 15-year-old boy by the name of Christy Bamu had been in trouble with his older sister Magali and her boyfriend.
These names sound so fake.
They're not. They're foreign, so Don't be a dick.
Oh, okay.
Magali was 29. Her boyfriend, I believe, was 30. She was the oldest of, I think, 4 or 5 kids. Christy, he was the only son that I can find. And then there was 2 sisters, one that was 11 years old and one that was 20 years old. Christy and the 11 and 20-year-old sisters were both visiting, all 3 of them were visiting from Paris. And they were visiting on Christmas to be around their oldest sister, who's 29, and that's Magali. And you might think like, oh, these are, kids. What are they in trouble for? Were they fighting, stealing shit? Maybe they were speaking in tongues. No, he and his 2 sisters were accused by the oldest sister and her boyfriend of practicing witchcraft. And Christy himself had been accused of casting spells against other kids that were his classmates.
Okay.
So his sisters likewise were accused of some form of witchcraft, some like spells they were trying to cast that these 3 kids were just like, whoa. I mean, there's a 20-year-old involved, and that's not exactly a kid, it's an adult, but they were just like, whoa, chill the fuck out. Like, we don't know what you're talking about. So a lot of things come out about the older sister, Magali, and her boyfriend, and after the fact, things get said that they were like obsessed with this form of witchcraft called, I think it's Kindoki is how you pronounce it.
All right.
And it's a form of witchcraft from their native Democratic Republic of Congo. And it's something that especially the boyfriend, his name is Eric, apparently had a fixation on. And while that's debated by Magali after the fact, there is little debate that Eric's obsession of it leads to some actions and accusations that just get really carried away. And he decides that these 3 that are in his house who are visiting for Christmas to see their older sister have evil spirits in them that are causing them to do evil things. They need to have some sort of an exorcism to get that evil spirit out of them and prevent them from casting spells on other people. And the way he decides to perform this exorcism is basically to just beat the shit out of the 3 of them, not just with his fists, but attacking them with other various objects like sticks, knives, a hammer and chisel at one point.
This doesn't seem legit. Like, it just seems like this person was wanting to beat these kids.
Well, I mean, if you look at this in the lens of like someone who believes in witchcraft, like the Salem witch trials or just the witch trials in general, it's like if someone said something you didn't like and you accused them of being a witch, it basically justified whatever horrible thing you wanted to do to them. And even though it's 2010, that's exactly what takes place in this apartment on Christmas. So the 2 girls, they're getting assaulted along with their brother Christy, and they basically decide what they're going to do is like try and talk sense into him. And that's not working. And it's not helping. And at some point he tells them he's going to throw them out the window because they're witches and they'll be able to fly. And it's going to prove that he's right. Very witch trial bullshit,
That's insane.
Yeah, obviously. So they ask their older sister, like, hey, can you help us? Can you talk some sense into him? And she's just like, no, you're witches. You're possessed. And she encourages Eric to continue the abuse. And later on, the 20-year-old sister, who's 21 at the time, the interviewer says that they asked their older sister for help, but, quote, she wouldn't do a damn thing, end quote. And the couple, Magali and her boyfriend, were convinced that the three of them had come there not to visit them for the holidays, but to kill them. The saddest part is the three of them, visiting for Christmas, thought this was going to be like a nice family get-together. Yeah. And it just turns awful. And their dad, I think, is back in Paris, and he said, like, the worst part about everything that happened is this happened from someone they loved and trusted. And it's just brutal. The two sisters, they're getting targeted so much that they eventually just decide to say, like, okay, you're right. You know what? We do practice witchcraft, and we're super, super sorry, and we're never going to do it again. And so he kind of focuses his attention after that, Eric does, on Christy, the 15-year-old brother. And he doesn't understand what is happening, and he keeps begging for him to stop assaulting him. And he refuses to admit he practices witchcraft. He thinks it's going to make it better.
Oh, my God.
So the exorcism, which is really just some brutal torture and assault with all these various weapons that the guy has around his apartment, it goes on for quite a while, and it leaves Christy in such a terrible state that he's basically just begging his sister and his boyfriend to let him die, because he knows that he's pretty far gone at that point. Eric decides that one of the things that needs to be done with him, the next stage of his exorcism, is to put him in a bath to wash away the evil spirits. And the way it's described by the people who were in the apartment was he was propped up so he wouldn't sink under the water, and he just sort of let himself slip under the water, and he drowned, and he died.
So they killed him.
They killed him. Just straight up, this guy became convinced this kid was possessed and beat him to death and drowned him in a bathtub. So after that, eventually the authorities obviously have to be called that someone has passed away in this apartment. And, the authorities come, they're like, what the fuck happened? They take statements, and eventually this does make its way to the court systems. When that happens, Magali states that she didn't believe in witchcraft, but her siblings that survived this whole ordeal were like, that's bullshit. Like, she encouraged this to happen. She was convinced we were possessed. She was convinced that we were practicing this witchcraft, and she was encouraging Eric to do it. She basically just tries to say, this was all Eric. I didn't believe in it. I was just afraid. Eric claims that, hey, I have brain damage from an accident when I'm a kid, so, like, it makes me believe in witchcraft and things like that.
Okay.
So this judge basically comes down and says, I don't give a shit if you believe in it. The way you treat other people and the things that you do are not allowed. Like, that's just straight up not okay. Regardless of what you believe, you can't assault another person. You certainly can't murder them. And so Eric winds up getting 30 years for the assault and death of Christy, and the older sister, Magali, winds up being sentenced to a minimum of 25 years. Eric's sentence is also a minimum. So in the UK, apparently, whatever charges were brought against them, it can't be, like, pleaded down. It can't be, like, time off for good behavior.
Okay, no parole.
Minimum 30
like
years,
early...
minimum
okay.
25. So those two people go to jail for the murder of the brother that came out to see them for the holidays. And it's just like, I've had holidays go sideways pretty bad. Like, I think everyone has. They've gone to, like, a holiday where family starts fighting, or there's, like, a lot of tension, or things don't go the way you want them to. This is probably the worst version of that you could ever possibly imagine. So when I was reading this one, I was like, this is so terrible. It's not even, like, necessarily an exorcism. It's just one person who just got super fixated on, like, you're evil and I need to fix you until someone died.
Imagine every Christmas after that that's what you remember.
That's all you're going to think about, because
Yeah.
that's what happened on Christmas, and it's going to be so horribly traumatizing for the rest of your life. So that's the first one. All right.
Okay.
Let's move on, and we're going to be going to the old US of A.
Sounds fun.
And this, not really. And we're going to Milwaukee, Wisconsin
Home
in
of
particular.
the power tools.
Is it home of the power tools? I mean, there's a brand called Milwaukee for sure.
Yeah.
I would say it's the home of some form of cheese. I don't know. I haven't been to Milwaukee in a minute. So I'm pretty sure it actually means Milwaukee, and it means the good place.
Oh my gosh.
I also haven't seen Wayne's World in a minute, so I can't quote that Alice Cooper line from that movie. But anyways, this actually takes place in the golden days of 2003. Y'all remember 2003, right?
I hated it.
I graduated that year. I started looking up stuff, and I was like, a lot of this stuff is pretty similar, like
I was a
average household income type of stuff. All that, I was like, yeah, this is fairly similar, except gas. Gas averaged $1.83 a gallon.
Yeah.
I'm just like, holy shit, that's nuts. Yeah, you grew up somewhere else, so obviously.
Yeah, it was like $4.
So you threw off the average. Thanks, asshole. It was probably lower than that in most places. I think it was $1.50 where I grew up. So, yeah, I graduated 2003. You turned a freshman, what, August of 2003?
Yeah.
It's creepy.
I was 13.
Okay, I was 18, so making it worse. Anyways, in the great state of Wisconsin, there was a woman named Patricia Cooper, and Patricia had an 8-year-old son named Terrence who had autism. They started attending church services as Patricia had recently just sort of got into religion, or perhaps this specific congregation had sort of like, I won't say lured, but like attracted her to it. Like a lot of times people are lukewarm to religion, then they find a group of people that they feel are like-minded, and they wind up, getting deeper into religion because of that. And I think that's what happened here. I'll have some further details on sort of why she joined this particular congregation later on. The place I am referring to that she decides to start worshiping is called the Faith Temple Church of the Apostolic Faith. I'm pretty sure apostolic is how you say that word. It's how it's spelled. I copied and pasted. Could be a made-up word that they just put on the side of their church. And I say that because when I read the descriptions of what this obviously mighty house of worship looked like, it was shocking to find it wasn't the grand cathedral one might expect from such a profoundly religious name. It was actually a single space that was rented out of a strip mall in Milwaukee. And the strip mall itself was in disrepair. I've heard it referred to multiple times as run down, with a bunch of empty spaces. And the most like ghetto detail about this place that I can state is that the Faith Temple Church of the Apostolic Faith was in a space that actually didn't have a sign for it. The sign from the old business was still on the outside wall of it. They just had a poster with that name pinned up to the wall. Wow. Because they were essentially renting out a space that used to be a bar.
Okay.
And they're just like, yeah, let's put a poster on the wall. That'll be good enough. And that's how people knew that they're at their church and they're ready to worship. So Patricia had begun attending services here and was bringing Terrence along. The reason for her sudden interest in the church was due to an incident that actually took place at a grocery store. They were grocery shopping. Terrence started having, a fit, and he was acting out in the store, and Patricia was attempting to calm him down. During that time, they were approached by a stranger. It was some woman who came over, introduced herself, and said, hey, I'm a member of this place called the Faith Temple Church of the Apostolic Faith, and I'm pretty sure the reason your son is acting out is because he's possessed by demons, and I think you should bring him to our church for a special prayer service. And so Patricia was just like, I guess, I can take him. Maybe that's what's been wrong all along. She knew her son was diagnosed with autism, but I think because times were tough, she was like, couldn't hurt, So Patricia's neighbor, a woman named Denise, she stated to the local newspaper that once Patricia started attending this church, she then 100% believed the problems that troubled little Terrence were a result of demons and not autism.
That is so not right.
Yeah. So,
the fact that this kid is autistic, right? And now they're going to ignore all of the things that could help him and just abuse him until he dies too.
What's the worst part about these exorcisms gone wrong is that they are performed by people who don't know what the fuck they're doing. And even if they were some type of exorcism that's supposed to yield some sort of a result of driving out a demon, the methods that they choose are just obviously stupid, dangerous. So one day comes along, I think it's 3 months into her being there, and the congregation tells her hey, we're going to have this special prayer service today to exorcise the demons out of Terrence. She says, dope. So multiple members of the congregation, led by a preacher named Ray Hempful, they all lay their hands upon the boy and they begin praying to God to remove the evil spirits from him. So the preacher, the mom, and several of the other people in the congregation. After that, they lay him on the ground and multiple ladies hold down 8-year-old Terrence, including his mother, while the preacher, Hempful, sits on his chest. Some accounts say that he just laid on the child. Others say that he sat on his chest. What is certain here, without a doubt, is that whatever he did to keep the kid down, he made sure his body weight was on the chest of 8-year-old Terrence. So this part is sad, so maybe a trigger warning for parents. Might want to skip ahead 30 seconds to a minute. So the special prayer service lasted for 2 hours after this. And the congregation was convinced during it that the evil spirits were leaving Terrence since he was flailing and kicking on the ground and gasping for air while Hempful was sitting on top of him. And when the prayer/ritual/exorcism had concluded, Hempful got off of the fucking kid to discover 8-year-old Terrence was dead. Not shocking, a grown man putting his full weight on the chest of an 8-year-old boy prevented him from breathing, And his kicking and flailing weren't demons leaving his body, but it was him dying. And it's not stated who called the police in all these articles I read, but it just stayed simply an adult present.
Okay.
So someone called and didn't even want the congregation to know that they were the one that called. But yeah, the police show up, statements are taken, Terrence is attempted to be revived, it doesn't work. They're like, well, we have to figure out what happened to him, but it's pretty clear from the statements what happens. Ray Hemphill was a maintenance worker prior to becoming a preacher for this church that has this sign just taped up on the fucking window.
What?
Shocker, he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing when he's performing an exorcism. He winds up being charged with felony abuse of a child. I'm shocked it's not just fucking murder.
Yeah.
And when he was asked, hey, do you think maybe you and your congregation misinterpreted the child's diagnosed autism for possession? He said, quote, "It wasn't confused. I know what I'm talking about," end quote.
This maintenance worker turned pastor
Yeah.
is like, I know what I'm talking about when it comes to possession of a child.
Yeah, versus autism. Then he would also say that Terrence, quote, had spirits in him, end quote, and that the congregation had only asked God to, quote, deliver him, end quote. Like he's blaming God, like, hey, we prayed for God to get rid of the spirit, so if he died, then that was God's will. So for the crime of killing poor Terrence, Ray Hemphill was ordered to pay $1,224.75 in restitution and, quote, refrain from performing any form of exorcism rituals until he had received extensive training in them, end quote. So, like, try not and exorcise more 8-year-old kids, please. He then receives a 2.5-year sentence in jail, or 2.5 years for those people who aren't reading a script in a weird way, and 7.5 years on probation.
I cannot believe he murdered a child and that's what he gets.
I mean, the mom who, like, was there was just like, hey, we just did our thing. Like, we were just trying to save my son.
What?
So it's just like her neighbors were like, that bitch is fucking crazy. Like, she was fine. And then she decided that it was all like demons inside her kid. And then afterwards, all she talks about is like that they did the right thing. That is something that is very common to these folks that do these things. They just are insistent, like, it's God's will. God was just acting through me. Like, yeah, I killed that 8-year-old kid because God wanted him to die. So it's horrific. So I know that this is kind of on the nose for this episode, but seriously, when I was researching this, I just kept thinking, like, Jesus fucking Christ, dude. Like, I get it. It's a possession episode. It's very religion heavy, but I'm pretty sure if Jesus was listening to this episode, he's probably just saying, like, Jesus fucking Christ. Because holy shit, how dumb can you be? Like, how can you think this is actually going to be helpful?
How can this, you're as a mother letting these people do that to your child?
It's just such a sad example of how a group of people can be so deluded by any thought. Yeah,
people,
just like, hey, we all thought we were right. It's like the fucking witch trials. It's like any paranoia experiment that you could run on people where somehow like abuse and persecution and just straight up murder is a good thing because you're doing it for the right reasons. And it's like, no, you weren't even doing it for that. So, and that's only 2. I'm covering 3. So, the last case I'm going to talk about here is that of, I'm going to try and say her name correctly here, Mirachika Irina Krnichi. And she was often called just by her middle name, Irina, so that's how I'm going to call her from now on. She was born in 1982 in Romania, and life did not start out very well for Irina. Her mom was an abusive alcoholic, so she did not have a good upbringing even from an infancy. After a few years on this earth, her father wound up taking his own life. After that happened, her mother, because she was an abusive alcoholic, just decided she was not going to keep her around. So her and her brother were basically just dropped off at an orphanage in Romania. And it wasn't like it was a nice place. It was a harsh upbringing for her and her brother. It's not like a rich person showed up to adopt them. There was very little as far as resources for this orphanage in Romania at the time, especially growing up during the Cold War and at the end of the Cold War when things collapsed. It was just like they were basically starved. But they weren't to the point of dying, and they were harshly abused by the people that they were being brought up by in the orphanage. So at some point, Irina becomes an adult. She starts to search for purpose in her life, which usually means some sort of service or work. And she finds one of her first jobs in the place quite a few young adults do, babysitting. She actually winds up becoming a nanny, a full-time nanny for a family in Germany.
Wow. When
she's 19. So she moves out to Germany, and she's there for, I think, 3 or 4 years. For like 3 years. She starts looking for something more stable and more permanent because she knows, the kid's going to grow up and then she's not going to have a job anymore. And a friend of hers from the orphanage reaches out to her and tells her, hey, I decided that I wanted to become a nun at a monastery that is back in Romania, and maybe you should consider doing that too. So she thinks about it, and after a few years, she says, you know what, I'm going to do that. And Irina decides to follow her friend's footsteps and sets out to the monastery of Târnacu in the Vaslui County in Romania. I might have fucked that pronunciation up. I'm saying it from an American way because that's what those letters mean to me, and I apologize if I said it wrong. So she starts to become a nun. She's attending mass. She's learning karate or ninja stuff or whatever nuns actually have to learn. I'm not quite sure. I've only ever seen Sister Act, and I'm pretty sure that's not accurate because it doesn't have the karate in it, but I might be mixing that up with monks.
It's all about warrior nun now.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that documentary.
Yeah. It's not a documentary. We know it's not a documentary. Adam's being dumb.
After she's there for a short amount of time, what appears to be just a few months, she starts to exhibit strange behavior. She's heard giggling during mass, and she's behaving as if she hears someone talking to her, and at times she's talking back to like an unseen person. Eventually, she starts being questioned on it, and she tells folks that the devil is talking to her, and the devil is telling her she is a sinful person. So her friends and family state prior to going to this monastery, she had never exhibited any of these symptoms. She had never behaved in these odd ways. They think something is wrong. Her brother goes to visit her and actually says at some point that when he was visiting her at the monastery, he saw Satan go into her and believed her to be suffering from demonic possession. So by April of 2005, her condition has deteriorated to the point where the monastery reaches out to medical professionals, and they're like, hey, we have a nun here who's having a really hard time. We need to bring her to a nearby hospital. There is a place that's in the town that they're in, and they take her there. I think she's there for a couple of weeks before she is released back into the care of the monastery with the diagnosis of, this bitch is crazy. But not really. It's a mean thing to say, but seriously though, they discharge her, and she's been diagnosed with schizophrenia. And she's been given medication for it. And they're like, make sure she takes it. It'll help her. She, will stop hearing these voices like slowly but surely. And it should be managed. And if she has any additional outbursts, bring her back because she might need a different medicine. She might need a different dosage. And so she's under the care of the monastery. It's a very common diagnosis for individuals who believe themselves to be possessed. And it was thought that she was taking her medication after this. But not long after this happens, her condition worsens yet again. When it worsens, they decide they're not taking her back for medical treatment.
Okay.
Clearly, this is the work of the devil. The priest of this monastery decides she needs an exorcism. And this doesn't wind up happening like you see it in the movies. This time, I'm sure you're hearing like, okay, a priest, a monastery, a bunch of nuns. They're clearly going to have the traditional exorcism where they have praying and crosses and rosaries and holy water and the whole like, the power of Christ compels you. Like that shit. No. They decide the best way that they're going to do this is they tie her to a massive cross. They put her in a dark, damp room. They stuff a towel into her mouth that is partially down her throat, and they leave her in there by herself in the dark for 3 fucking days.
Wow.
This is the manner of exorcism they perform on her. Shockingly, this method does not work. When they return after 3 full days, they're like, she's fucking dead.
When you say shockingly, you mean not actually shockingly.
Sarcastically, shockingly. Yeah, it's not shocking that you could do this to a human being and they fucking die. The priest of the monastery didn't disagree that she had a mental illness. He just believed she was also possessed. This eventually has the police show up. It goes to trial. Her brother agrees with the priest. That statement about him seeing the devil enter her and her being possessed, he gives that as testimony during the trial. The priest states at some point, I don't think it was during the trial, but when he's being interviewed by local paper or media, he states, quote, you can't take the devil out of people with pills, end quote. And that's why he had to perform an exorcism on her. So she died as a combination of dehydration and a lack of oxygen from the fucking towel they stuffed down her throat, and the fact that they left her there for 3 days without any food or water. The priest was sentenced to 14 years in prison, and the 4 nuns who assisted him in this quote-unquote exorcism, which was really just torment and abandonment and neglect, they received 5 to 8 years in jail. The priest was defrocked, so he's no longer a priest, and the monastery was closed. He insists, however, because he has been released to this day, they did the right thing, and the will of God has been done. So, what a fucking asshole.
Yeah, that is so dumb.
It's like you didn't even do an exorcism. Like,
you just murdered
this is the
person.
laziest shit I've ever fucking heard. You just tied her down into a room and left her alone. Like, you could have done that without stuffing a fucking towel in her mouth. Like, it makes no sense. It's not an exorcism.
I think the theme of all of this is these people thought, like, I'm going to do whatever I want.
Yeah. I'm in charge here, and I'm going to do whatever I want. And this dude had been called out by, like, the archbishop of the diocese as, like, he had these nuns not following the word of God, like the written word that they're supposed to practice. Like, he basically made the congregation, like, loyal to him and not loyal to the
like
teachings of Jesus. Yeah. He straight up was like a cult leader, and they told him, like, you need to fucking stop or we're going to kick you out of the church. And he told him, like, I'll do what you say, but I don't believe you. And I don't trust you. Like, and he argued some precedent from, like, the 1800s where someone had done similar to what he had that also ended badly. But this guy was a fucking asshole, and he wound up going to jail for 14 years because of it.
Good.
Because he cost someone their life because he was a dickhead. But yeah, these are just 3 sadly common examples of exorcisms gone wrong that cost people their life.
There is, I think, there's a documentary. I don't remember if it's on Netflix or Hulu, but it covers, one of these exorcisms that totally goes wrong. And like the entire family is in the house while they're doing this, and the person ends up drowning because of how they did it. And the documentary goes through the court case and all of the stuff that has something to do with that. So I mean, this is probably something that you could cover again in the future because there are so many instances of this happening.
I think one of the more famous cases is Annalise Michel, who was later turned into the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose because of how she passed away, and they, tried the priest for neglect and similar things to that, which is pretty well shown in the movie. It's more of like a court procedural than it is a horror flick at times, but yeah, it is very, very common. So I've covered a lot of the traditional possessions, so I've kind of bounced off of these because 1, there's not a lot of meat on the bones, like I mentioned. And 2, it's not the things that we're familiar with. So I thought it was time. It's spooky season, y'all. It's October 27th right now. It just rolled over to October 27th. So we're almost there. So hope you enjoyed this scary, almost mixture of paranormal and true crime. It's like dead center, which is kind of where Scaryish lays, and slightly depressing, unfortunately. But yeah, take that. You're welcome.
Okay.
All right. Before we move into Robin's topic, we're going to take a quick commercial break.
All right, welcome to my half of the episode where I just talked to you guys about how amazing going to F1 is and sitting outside the freaking Red Bull.
It was pretty cool.
Oh my God.
I've been to NASCAR and I've been to F1, and they're not that similar. I gotta say,
it's very, very different.
I was talking to my boss because he had to approve our time off, or my time off to go.
I was gonna say he's not my boss.
Yeah, but he was just like, I told him like, yeah, one of our friends had said like, oh, you guys are hillbillies now, you're into F1, and he just laughed. He's like, clearly they haven't been around F1 before. I was like, yeah, it's the only sporting venue I've ever gone to where the things you can buy other places are marked up at the event because they're like, F1 people spend money. So that $80 shirt's $130 here.
The Toto shirt that I want.
Fucking bizarre.
The Toto shirt that I want, okay, online right now, it is $70. At the event, it was $180.
Because they know like, people are going to fucking pay that money for it. I was like, I'm not an F1 person yet. I'm an F1 fan, but I don't got that sort of fucking money.
Dude, but sitting outside of the garages and watching Ferrari and Red Bull test their cars and do all that stuff.
It was a fun time.
Anyway, this is not that podcast. Maybe I'll start one. Who knows?
I know that 70% of our audience is women. All of our demographics across all of our social medias, that it tells us that. But guys, there's a reason Robin's into it. Drivers are all pretty fucking hot. Like, let's be real here. That's why she's into it as deeply as she is.
Yeah, they are. Okay. Anyway, my topic is not that, but if you guys want to talk to me about that, you can, feel free. But my topic this week is a good mystery, a fun little mystery, fun-ish, because it does involve people going missing or dying.
Sounds super fun, Robin. What the fuck?
We've covered a number of mysterious disappearances, mystery places, incidents, things like that in the past. There are so many strange things that have happened in the world, obviously. Lots of things that we can't explain. Adam's covered a lot of aliens and just strange instances.
Totally explainable. Aliens are real. Fucking case closed.
Okay, but there are some things that you can't just say aliens did that.
I mean, I could probably say that for just about
Bro,
everything.
No. Okay, so but when it comes to missing persons, strange disappearances, things of that nature, it's not so easy to explain. You can't just be like aliens took them.
I feel like at the end of this episode, I'm going to be able to say aliens did that.
But there's always the straightforward human element to a lot of these things, right? So you could always say people did it to a lot of these things. That sentence made no sense. You can always say people did it to something.
No, I thought it made sense. Like you could blame a human being rather than an alien.
Yeah. Like the theory that aliens built the pyramids. You know, that freaking, you guys know the ancient aliens guy, okay?
Yeah, there's a really good comedian out there who has a joke about how, like, Mexicans are the best at building stuff. He's like, like, there's pyramids in Mexico.
Yeah.
No one wonders who built them. It's just like, that's a pretty good fucking point.
I've
never heard people talk about those specific pyramids like, must have been aliens. And everyone's just like, oh yeah, we know who built those.
Yeah. But, this guy, the ancient aliens guy, is like, aliens built the pyramids. And, I mean, it could be aliens, or it could just be a huge group of people who used their own brains to come up with these genius ways to move these huge blocks and things like that. But with these disappearances, it's similar possibilities. It could be murder. It could be aliens. It could be demons, ghosts, what have you, right? But maybe it could just be someone who wants to disappear and live off the grid, like Amelia Earhart or something.
Is that what she wanted to do?
I don't know. I'm just saying there's conspiracy theories, okay?
I covered that one dude who faked his own death and came back like 8 years later.
That's true. Yeah, you did.
That was super good. That was a great topic.
But there's got to be someone. There's definitely someone out there who's faked their death.
I think
Obviously,
about doing it
covered one,
way more often than I should at this point.
But a conspiracy I came across just last week was some people think that Michael Jackson faked his death and that he's still alive out there.
No way.
Well, it was like they were using evidence of like the family at the funeral and how they weren't taking the funeral seriously and how they're like, they know he's alive out there. That's why they're joking and laughing and blah, blah, blah. When people go through...
He's just like... He was too big of a personality. He'd be hee-heeing his way all around the globe, and he would not be able to fucking... He would not be able to stand a raps. Hee-hee.
Stop! Oh my god, okay.
I don't buy into that one.
Okay, I don't either. I don't, but okay. Anyway, my topic this episode is going to be about a disappearance, and that is of Eloise Verborn de Wagner Bosquet.
Pretty good pronunciation. You committed to that.
Thanks. My sister over there who like went to school to speak German is probably like, awful.
Right.
Anyway, let's travel back in time, make our way over to the Galapagos Islands. It's a small island chain in the Pacific Ocean off the west coast of Ecuador.
Okay.
And
okay. It's hard for me to picture where Ecuador is, so I'm just figuring it out in my brain right now. Because that's in South America, right?
Yeah. It's south of us.
Duh. Is it Central America or South America? I guess is my real question.
What's closer to the equator?
Central, dipshit. I thought I was the dumb one in these questions.
Yeah, it's, Ecuador, equator, whatever. Anyway.
Wait, is that real? Is that why they named it that?
Bro.
No fucking way.
Yes. Look it up. Look it up right goddamn now.
This. All right. Lots of tangents. I apologize.
Many of you have heard of the Galapagos Islands as the place Charles Darwin used as inspiration for his theory of evolution because it's so isolated, lots of stuff evolving down there. You can imagine something like that has made these islands.
Holy fuck, it was named because it's on the equator.
Oh my god.
That's
you didn't
crazy.
learn that in school?
No, because the Spanish named it. Yeah, way to show up where people live and give it a new name. Jesus Christ. Sorry, okay, continue.
Anyway, oh god.
I'm sure I learned that in school. I've just forgotten it by now. I just said I graduated in 2003, so it's been 20 years.
God. I mean, okay. It's just funny to me that, we're constantly learning things, and I get to teach you stuff. It's cool. Okay.
I honestly have never known where the fucking Galapagos Islands were, too, so now I have a better idea in my brain of where they are.
All right, so you can imagine something like that has made these islands a bit of a big deal. People travel there from all over the world to get a glimpse into what it is that inspired Darwin. There's so many different animals. There's literally a species of tortoise there, named after the Galapagos Islands. There's just so many animals that are unique to this area, which is why he studied them, because they were isolated and therefore evolved within this area. I don't know. You guys can look that stuff up. So many of you out there in the world, not necessarily those listening to this podcast,
I don't
believe in the theory of evolution. Okay. Anyway, in 1929, a German doctor named Friedrich Ritter moved to the Galapagos in search of a fresh start, and he brought along one of his patients, a Dor Strauch.
Weird to bring a patient with you.
I don't know. Some people are into that, I guess. But they left their respective spouses.
Okay, that makes sense now.
So They left them behind and very much did start a new life. They started a homestead on Floriana Island, and the island would later become the namesake for a movie based on the events that will transpire here in this tale. So these two would go on to plant fruits and vegetables as well as raise chickens, typical homesteading stuff. They created, their own little world there, right? People would come to visit them, and they would find it so difficult to live there that they would eventually leave. Whereas these two were just like, we're roughing it,
Yeah. We don't have to worry about bills or taxes or shit. Like, we just got to worry about surviving day to day.
And the tortoises. They would write letters back home to friends and family. And these letters would go on to inspire others to come join them in the Galapagos. So because of these letters, they kind of became little mini celebrities. People were like, whoa, these people are out there doing this,
Do you think they were recruiting because they wanted other people to come out there to grow things they weren't, so they could, like, have some form of trade? Where it's like, hey, extra supplies for everyone, grow more than you need, and then we can just trade the excess.
The islands used to be like a trading post, kind of like, in Pirates.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
So it's kind of like those little ports where everybody comes to trade crap.
Tortuga, is that what that was named?
Yeah, something like that. But in 1931, this just happened. In 1931, Heinz Whitmer and his family, a teenage son and his pregnant wife, Margaret, arrived to the islands.
She's pregnant and he's taking her to the Galapagos Islands to start a new life.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. They set up their own little homestead with Dr. Ritter's help. So this guy comes, helps this family set up their place. Despite this initial connection, this initial interaction, the story goes that they had very little interaction with each other after. And they were all fairly independent, and outside of the occasional visitor to the islands, mostly kept to themselves, despite being like only an hour or so away from each other. They just did not, mesh together, I guess.
They just stayed to themselves.
Respected each other's space and had their own homesteads, and maybe they traded veggies or whatever back and forth, but it was chill, with just these two parties there. So then came trouble. Baroness, quote unquote Baroness, Eloise Verborn de Wagner Bosquet arrived like, it's me. Hi. I'm the problem. It's me.
Wow.
She was Austrian. She was young. She was attractive.
She sounds hot. That name just sounds hot.
On an island that wasn't exactly what you'd call populated, she was a hot commodity, okay? Some described her as sexy and wild.
Can you imagine moving a place that has like 20 people on it and being like, I am the hottest bitch on this island?
And she acted like it. So this person, she acts like it. She brings her two German lovers along with her, Robert Philipson and Rudolf Lorenz. Some sources say that they were actually like escorts of hers, like she hired them to, I don't know. She had a third man with her, an Ecuadorian named Manuel Valdivieso. Valdivieso. I don't know how to pronounce that. Hopefully.
I don't think a lot of us are going to fact check you if you just say it with confidence.
I have
that first read is pretty good.
He was supposedly just hired to do all the work.
I was going to say, she's going to bring some dude that's going to build her homestead, because she's sure as shit not going to build it herself.
So they set up their own homestead. that they called Hacienda Paradise. Though
This bitch is so extra.
though they were homesteading, she announced she actually had plans to build a fancy hotel there. I'm sure her presence there wasn't exactly welcome by everyone. It's a bunch of islands that aren't populated by people, and then the few people that are there are homesteading. Then comes this rich girl, and she's just like, I'm going to build a huge hotel. That's what I'm doing here. It totally ruins the vibe, that's going on
isolated away from everyone vibe.
She just didn't fit in with the existing groups, and she seemed like a bit of a diva, Avi. She would even go on to call herself the Empress of Floriana Island.
What a dumb bitch. I hate her. Oh my God.
So
I fucking hate this chick.
So when visitors
She's the one that disappears, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I'm on board with this.
What the hell? You can't say that.
Why the fuck not?
It's like, yeah, I'm okay with bitches disappearing.
No, not bitches. This bitch, though.
Oh my God. So when visitors would show up on their yachts or boats, whatever, she'd have these elaborate made-up stories to tell them. And she'd go around wearing a pistol and a whip. And she would be wearing like these skimpy outfits. Like she'd be walking around in her underwear and stuff. Like I saw a picture where it's like all you saw was like titties,
Indiana Jane.
Oh God. But she just seemed like she had things going on there. Maybe there was something else going on with her that made her this way. We don't know. But she went so far as to seduce the governor of Galapagos and anointed herself the queen, quote unquote empress, quote unquote queen. You can understand why something like that would rub people the wrong way. And might I remind you, she does already have 2 German lovers there with her.
I'm just saying, you're in the middle of nowhere with other people who are already there, and you're being kind of a fucking dick. It's like, it's not going to take a lot to invoke an act of aggression.
Her schedule was already full with these 2 dudes. And then she somehow makes room for more, right? I'm sure she just stirs the pot everywhere she goes. She became a bit of a celebrity of sorts. People that were sailing in the area made it out to be like, I don't know, if you were her, or if you met her and hung out with her, it was like this whole thing like, oh my God, I met so-and-so. Did you meet so-and-so? No. I guess you're not as lucky. You know what I mean? Like,
I hate this fake person that you just invented too. I hope their boat sinks.
I assume similar to how we all get excited to meeting celebrities, that's what people felt like when they hung out with her, met her, or got to talk to her. It was a story to tell. That being said, none of the fellow residents, being the Whitmers and Dr. Ritter, they didn't like her, obviously. They hated her. They ignored her if they could. It just was not the vibe. She did not mix well with what was going on the island. She did not
play well with others.
Yeah. So things went south as time went on. I feel like at this point, Adam would have murdered her.
I wouldn't have murdered her. I would have played pranks or something like that. I've been like, oh, this fucking bitch has got to go. It would have been like more of a Disney movie, driving out the obnoxious rich lady, versus like a Lifetime movie where she vanishes.
Lorenz was no longer one of her favorites, and Philipson, the other German, started beating him.
Fuck.
And this caused Lorenz to go and spend all his time with the Whitmers until she would go over and get him. Anytime things got hard, there would be fights. The Ritters and the Whitmers started suspecting that the Baroness was stealing their mail and bad-mouthing them to visitors, who then repeated everything to the press. So it was just like a whole drama, right?
You move there to get away from society, and then this fucking chick shows up.
It's like they need to have a reality TV show called like Keeping Up with the blah, blah, blah.
How long ago was this again, you said?
1930s.
I was going to say like 32. Yeah, I don't think that would have gone over well back then.
But it turned into like Lord of the Flies out there, it seems like, because a lot of shit started going down. So they were all being crappy to each other. Philipson stole Ritter's donkey one night and set it loose in the Whitmer's garden. Heinz Whitmer, thinking that it was a feral donkey, then shot the donkey. So
a feral donkey?
I don't know, man. When I read that, I was like, donkeys can go feral?
I didn't know that either.
I mean, I'm sure he just was like, what's this random donkey doing in my garden, eating my veggies? you know?
Guess I'll kill it.
Yeah. On March 27th, 1934, both the Baroness and Phillipson disappear. So some say that there was a long scream that could be heard that day before it was just silence. According to Margaret Whitmer, the Baroness came to her home and said that some friends had arrived on a yacht and were thinking of taking them to Tahiti. According to Margaret, she left everything they weren't taking with them to Lorenz, and that the Baroness and Phillipson left that same day, never to be heard from again. This is all coming from Margaret Whitmer, okay? There's no other reports from individuals that day that say like, oh, we saw so-and-so go here, go there.
Margaret seems pretty trustworthy to me. Case closed.
No one even remembers a boat having arrived that week. So if there's no boat that arrived, like, who could Margaret be talking about, you know? And then the two of them never arrived at Tahiti. Obviously, they disappear. That's the definition. They don't get to where they're supposed to go. They also left behind just about everything that they owned. And according to Dorr, the patient, Dr. Ritter's patient, she claims that the things left behind were things that she would have wanted to have with her, even on a short journey. So why...
Her whip.
So why would they leave all that behind? So Strauch and Ritter believe that the disappearance was the result of a murder by Lorenz and the Whitmers. So that they believe that all of it was a cover-up. That Lorenz, because he was being beaten by Phillipson, possibly murdered the two of them with the help of the Whitmers. Supposedly, according to Strauch...
Did they dress him up like a donkey and turn him loose in someone's field? Think I've solved this one.
Supposedly, according to Strauch, the bodies could have likely been burned, as the acacia wood that was readily available on the island can burn hot enough to destroy even bone.
Wow.
So
I'm marking that down in my book of things I shouldn't know.
So according to the internet, because I had to look up, you know, the feasibility of using acacia wood to burn things, because it's a hardwood, like the type of wood, it's a hardwood.
Right, I got it.
It burns really well and super hot because of how dense it is. And it also lasts for a really long time when burning. I bet it's really expensive.
Oh, yeah. Acacia wood, I've had to research for different things because it's been performed in, like, rituals and shit.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh.
And it's expensive as fuck.
Some people even say that it smells really good when it burns, which is interesting.
It smells like Baroness.
Fuck. That stuff. Okay. Even more suspicious is Lorenz was in quite the hurry to get out of Galapagos following the disappearances. He made it to Santa Cruz before disappearing soon after.
Oh, shit.
So months after his disappearance, a mummified set of bodies, presumed to be the bodies of Lorenz and the fisherman who had taken him on his, trip outside, were found on the island of Marchena, and they seem to have died of dehydration. No one knows how it is that they got to that island because the island is nowhere near Santa Cruz.
Wow.
So no one knows why they were there.
That's an extra layer of bizarre for this mystery.
Yeah. November of 1934, Dr. Ritter dies of supposed food poisoning. And it's supposedly death by poorly preserved chicken.
Okay.
I imagine he just died of runs that never ended.
The black shit.
Yeah, the black shit. Fun fact, Ritter was a supposed vegetarian. So why would he be eating chicken?
Maybe he just didn't have enough things to eat on the island, or maybe it was just like he decided he was going to have chicken that one time, and he's just like, son of a bitch.
Even more sus is the Whitmers noted that Strauch, the patient that he had taken with him, waited until Ritter was too far gone before they even called for help.
That's fucked up.
Yeah. So, lots of death going on here. Lots of mystery.
Suspicious death.
Suspicious. This led people to believe that his own patient had poisoned him, possibly because their treatment was getting worse and the doctor was blaming the actual patient for getting worse. Some people say that it may have been just because of how uncaring and cold that he seemed in general. There's no way to tell now, obviously, because everyone's gone. Margaret wrote that he had actually cursed his patient in his dying words.
Fuck.
So
sounds like the patient was the one he thought killed him.
But this is in stark contrast to her, Strauch's, retelling of the story, in which she details the whole incident lovingly, like caringly, and not just letting him die type of thing. These deaths and disappearances became known as the Galapagos Affair, and even had a movie inspired by the events that conspired there. None of the mysteries were definitively solved. There's no solid answers as to where they went, what happened to the people that died. Everything is just speculation, and Ritter's death was officially ruled an accident. Other than the mummified bodies, no other bodies turned up, and people don't know how those two even ended up where they ended up. Why they were so far from their destination, you know. The Whitmers remained on the island, eventually opening a hotel on Floriana.
Wow.
That is still open to this day.
Get the fuck out of here.
So they became pretty wealthy once tourism on the island grew. Their descendants supposedly still own land and business there. They run tours and things like that.
Hear me out. 12,500 patrons were going to Galapagos Island.
Margaret stuck to her story. Even when she died in 2000, she never said otherwise. Wow. She was like, this is what happened. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. Some say she always hinted that there was more, but no one knows for sure if she was just sensationalizing the story for tourists or whatever.
Right.
Ritter's patient went on to write a book about the whole incident. Once they returned to Germany, they wrote about the events that occurred in Galapagos and how hard it was for the early settlers. The book tells the story of Lorenz killing the Baroness and Philipson, but does not provide any definitive proof.
Well, no proof, but the story is that
just
Lorenz
the story,
did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And no proof, but that was the way that they told the story. It was like, I feel it in my gut that that's what happened.
Okay.
And so it's just a personal story, right? In the movie, there is a legend involving tortoises, after which the islands are named. And one or the other. The tortoises are named after the island's named after the tortoises. I don't know. I should have looked that up beforehand.
Probably, yeah.
But either way, the islands are named the same as the tortoises. In the legend, these can see what the intentions of those visiting the islands are. So if you have bad intentions, they can curse you with a tragic fate. I don't know how much of it is true, as it is just a legend, but it does seem like there was something going on with these early settlers, whether that be murder or just like unlucky fate, you know?
It reminds me of that episode of Rick and Morty where he's like, don't stare into the eyes of the truth, Tortoise Morty. So now it makes sense where that came from.
Okay. But yeah, that's the story of the mysterious disappearance of the Baroness of the Galapagos.
There's a lot of people that disappeared down there. So
yeah.
Not just Lorenz, like, killing them, but then when he leaves, he becomes a fucking mummy, which is crazy. And the guy who's taking him out of there also dies. So
yeah,
it's pretty bizarre. And the fact that the only people that survive going to that island wind up fucking filthy rich and making a hotel there is just bizarre ending. It's just, there's a movie there for sure. So
yeah,
solid story. Good job, Robin.
Thanks.
All right, that's everything we have for the cursed episode 279 that did not want to be released. Let's hope that I'm able to get this saved and edited and released to you all by Friday morning. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate you. If you have a story you would like to share with us, it doesn't have to be about possession gone wrong or the Galapagos Islands. It could be about anything spiritual, supernatural, coincidental, extraterrestrial, true crime, ghostly, ghastly in nature. Feel free to reach out to us by emailing storytime@scaryish.com or going to our website, scaryish.com, and clicking on Contact Us. You can fill out that form. It comes directly to us, or you can hit us up on our social medias. Facebook is facebook.com/scariyishpodcast. Twitter is @scariyishpod. And Instagram is @scariyishpodcast. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us, how can they do so?
You can go to patreon.com/scariyishpodcast. Those are monthly donations with tiers starting at $1. You can also go to ko-fi.com/scariyishpodcast. And those are one-time donations. And all your donations really help us keep this podcast going.
Indeed, they do. So thank you so much for everyone who supports us, everyone who listens. We appreciate every single one of you. And that's everything we got. So, Robin, why don't you go ahead and sign us out?
Keep on creeping on.
Wow. Bye.